I would like to open our meeting by acknowledging that we are on the traditional territories of the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. It is very important for us to, in recognition, to acknowledge traditional land. And again, I say we have a very good turnout today, and I'm very pleased to welcome the Commissioner and the Deputy Commissioners from the Police Complaints Commission for British Columbia. We also have representatives from the British Columbia First Nations Justice Council and the Canadian Criminal Justice Association. Again, thank you for attending. As most of you know, our mission is to see the creation of a national center for policing excellence, not bricks and mortar, but a national entity responsible for the development of a current and relevant curriculum for all new police officers in Canada. Our speakers today will discuss both innovative training initiatives and the importance of providing our police officers with a better understanding of Indigenous history, culture, and practices. Our moderator today will introduce our speakers and guide the discussion. Please enter any questions you have in the chat for our moderator to draw from. And to ensure our webinar goes smoothly, could you please mute your mic and remember to turn it on when you wish to speak. As I said, I would now like to welcome and introduce our moderator, Jason Fenno, and again express my sincere appreciation to Jason for helping us coordinate this webinar and for volunteering to work on our webinar committee. We've had very many successful webinars, and of course, it's because of people like Jason, they've gone well. But welcome, Jason, and I'd just like to do a brief introduction. Jason Fenno. Yes?
Oh, sorry.
Question? No problem. No problem, Jason. Jason holds a PhD from Chanie Wenjack School of Industrial Studies, Indigenous Studies at Trent University. His research was in partnership with the Selkirk First Nations, seeking to understand the impact of Indigenous-led community safety officer program in Selkirk First Nation, Yukon, including its strengths, challenges, tensions, self-determination, self-governance, and reconciliation. Jason also holds a master's degree from the University of Regina. Jason, quite interestingly, also interned in Interpol in Washington in human trafficking and the Child Protection Division, which is rather interesting. Jason, we look forward to the day. We help you out in any way we can. And I want to thank you for, really seriously thank you for all the work you've done to put this together. And I look forward to you introducing the others and moderating our webinar. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for that great introduction. And I'm humbled and honored to serve as the moderator today, as I believe this is an excellent opportunity to learn about innovative initiatives, programs from three highly respected Indigenous leaders, improving the relationship between police, Indigenous nations, and communities. I believe this webinar also, as it falls on the day before National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, which is tomorrow, holds even more significance when it comes to listening and as we learn from Gina Taylor and Chief Chappell today. So I want to thank Dave and John for this opportunity to serve as the moderator. And I will get into introducing our first speaker today, who is Taylor Sayers, a member of the Kitigan-Zibi First Nation and the Director of Corporate Services with United Chiefs and Council of Manitoulin Anishinaabe Police Service. Taylor has been instrumental in contributing to the development of culturally responsive policing initiatives for the organization, including the following innovative projects such as Ingag Dawab Jig, Citizens Review Committee, and Social Navigator Initiative, and the Lighting the Fire Within project. With that said, I'll provide Taylor this time and mute myself. And if you'd like any questions, comments, you could please put those in the chat and I'll be moderating it. Thank you so much. Chimiguch.
Honey, everyone. Thank you, Jason, for that wonderful introduction, and Dave also for allowing me to be here and kind of share some information about our police service and what we have been implementing within our communities and within our organizations. So as Jason mentioned, I'm the Director of Corporate Services with UCCM Anishinaabe Police Service. I've been with the organization for just over 15 years now. We police 6 First Nation communities on and around Manitoulin Island. We have 51 employees, with 31 of those employees being sworn police officers. I'm going to share with you a component of our project that we started in 2019 called Lighting the Fire Within. The project was funded by Women and Gender Equality Canada, and one of the components of the project was to develop a trauma-informed curriculum that was culturally sensitive that would be delivered to our employees. It was a 5-year project, and it was implemented to address the rise in domestic disturbance and intimate partner violence calls that we were seeing within our communities. The project had an evaluation component, which is going to serve as one of the most important components. And over the course of the project, 7 evaluations were completed and submitted to our funding agency Wage. One of the evaluations questions asked, have UCCM Anishinaabe police officers been provided with the knowledge and skills to be able to respond to incidents of intimate partner violence in culturally safe and trauma-informed ways? So that was the thing that we wanted to evaluate moving forward. We wanted to collect information on it, and we wanted to find out, were we successful in this component? And one of the reasons why we wanted to implement this training, because this actually started years before we received the funding, was because we started to recognize gaps in the trainings that were offered within Ontario for us at the Ontario Police College, the OPPA Academy, pre and post recruit training, and then internally within our own services training. So to start this off, in terms of the training and development of it, we conducted a needs-based assessment. So we wanted to find out from our police officers, what do you know about being culturally informed? And what do you know about being trauma informed? And what do you want to know? And then we also had an advisory committee that was comprised of individuals who either have experienced or worked with individuals who experienced intimate partner violence. And we asked them the same question. What do you want the police officers to know? And what would you like further training for them on? And from this information, we collected the assessments and dove into literary review of studies, recommendations, reports that were done on policing, specifically within Ontario. As you know, there are a lot of reports done. There are a lot of recommendations that are usually done on police. So I use this information to complete the curriculum and recognize the common themes. The model that was developed for the purposes of the curriculum that would be delivered at our service was amended from the Missouri model based in the States. And that model is to ensure a trauma-informed organization. So one of the things that I noticed as I was developing this curriculum was that there was a lack of knowledge being shared regarding Indigenous people's experiences with the police, specifically the over-policing and under-policing aspect, the historical impacts of colonization, the trauma that is created from this, and how do we as police officers, and I don't say we, I mean, how do they as police officers understand this trauma and the trauma responses that they'll consistently see within our Indigenous communities? So I worked with a number of facilitators on this after careful consideration of who would be delivering the content and who would be seen as experts. Specifically developing protocols and considerations for the sessions, and met with the facilitators because I wanted the facilitators to understand that when they're delivering this content to police officers, to police service employees, it's not meant to shame or blame anyone. It's specifically to allow an informed curiosity to occur in these sessions and for the exchange of information to occur, as well as questions to be asked within these sessions. Facilitators thought it was great. They loved it. Their trainings actually matched up with our goals and objectives for this curriculum and what we wanted to deliver. So approximately 60 sessions of culture-informed and trauma-informed trainings were held from 2022 to 2024. And we also held a gathering in March 2025 with over 150 attendees in attendance. Many of these attendees were from our own service, but then we also had attendees from the Ontario Provincial Police, Toronto Police Service, and many other larger municipal police services, along with the Indigenous police services in Ontario. Feedback on the cultural sessions were that 92.5% agreed or strongly agreed that the session gave them a better understanding of cultural teachings of the Indigenous communities they serve. 97.5% agreed or strongly agreed they learned valuable lessons shared from the stories that were shared within the sessions. 100% were either very satisfied or satisfied with the sessions. And respondents identified further cultural teachings and specifically requesting cultural healers to attend the services. Participants stated that they had a better understanding of Indigenous culture and teachings as they serve First Nation communities, and participants discussed their learning as pivotal in integrating the teachings and activities for their own wellness. So one of the quotes from the sessions was, "I will forever have the advantage of knowledge, awareness, and understanding of the Anishinaabe language and culture for my everyday work life, no matter who comes into my path." And that was specifically for the cultural aspects. For the trauma-informed aspects, we put out the surveys, and 90% either agreed or strongly agreed that the session increased their knowledge on how to provide trauma-informed policing or service provisions in their day-to-day duties. 96% found the training relevant to their work, highlighting its practical applications in their professional roles, and 72.3% and 26.9% respondents reported being very satisfied and satisfied overall with the information they received. We also included a component of self-care, mindfulness, and understanding mental health challenges that were related to their personal and professional lives. Another quote from the session was, "Is being informed of the impacts that trauma can have on the memory is extremely important. So in actions and behaviors of witnesses, which can show police perception and cause investigators to believe the victim is lying or being dishonest, when in fact that is not the case. They're operating with their survival brain and not making rational decisions with their thinking mind." So we concluded this all with the gathering held in 2025 of March. We're also going to be hosting another gathering in October 2025 in Toronto, just to continue these conversations, to continue these learnings. There were challenges, of course, those buy into the training. A lot of people were like, "I don't know what this training is about. I don't necessarily want to sign up." But overall, the feedback once they were in the sessions was the sessions need to be longer, and they wanted more of the training. They also had to gain knowledge on understanding that everyone has bias, that they are aware of their own bias, and that they're able to address their own mental health. Of course, there was a cost to this, but for us, we see this benefit as we move forward and look to create a long-standing, robust program that everyone within our police service can be a part of. So just wanted to share that all with you. That's the conclusion of my presentation. And if anyone has any questions, please let us know. Miigwech.
All right. Thank you so much, Taylor. That was amazing. I'm just looking, see if anybody has questions now. You can put them in the chat. I wrote down my own kind of quasi question here. People still thinking about it and maybe potential question coming up. But something I wrote down as a possible question with those police services that you've partnered with for the training, have any of those police services looked at maybe trying to make this a like an ongoing like requirement or a consistent long-term partnership in the long run for their officers, like newer officers to come in to go through these types of trainings?
So not at the moment, no. Right now we are looking at, okay, because we are able to sit here and say that this is definitely a gap that needs to be addressed specifically, you know, for our police officers who are coming back, you know, from the Ontario Police College and from their recruit training, that they need knowledge of their communities that they're serving. So for us, we're just really kind of focused on let's build this for our service. And, you know, if others want to adopt it, more than welcome to. But right now our focus is ensuring, you know, that our communities are well taken care of.
Absolutely. That's a great point. In terms of also, I'm guessing not wanting to put too much on your staff there, as it sounds like a large undertaking when it comes to these programs. It looks like we have one question in the chat here from Kenneth Harris. Interested in the training sessions where they are dictated, interactive, simulation based? What kind of specific types of trainings it seems like Kenneth is asking about?
So they were actually a variety. We had sessions in which they did role playing. So when it came to the de-escalation component, they did 40 hours of crisis intervention training with a company that came to us from the United States and essentially said that, you know, we're going to put your officers through the test. They provide a lot of information around mental health, some of the, you know, diagnosis that individuals, you know, so what does it look like when a person experienced psychosis? What does it look like, you know, with schizophrenia, that type of thing? And, you know, they essentially tested our police officers on their responses and anyone who attended the session. The other thing is I wanted the information. So I work with the facilitators and I said, they have to understand how to operationalize this content. It's one thing to just tell them, understand through real life scenarios, different, if they're asking investigative questions, what do those questions look like? How do they apply this in a real life setting? So it was very specific to the facilitators when I met with them that this is exactly how they needed to teach it and for people to understand it.
That's a great point to make, especially when it comes to each specific training session, kind of fitting those individuals that sounds like taking part in it. The next question from Dave. Do you think the trust in police has improved due to officers taking part in these types of trainings?
It's hard to say because we didn't necessarily measure the trust. And there's a lot of different components that come with trust. And I say that because within Indigenous policing, we are known to be very underfunded. So when it comes to response times and, you know, responding to different calls, a lot of times we did community survey just recently, and they felt that their call wasn't significant enough to call the police. So they might have been having a argument with a neighbor and they felt like it wasn't necessarily needed to be reported. So that type of thing. And that's where I'm like, I hesitant to respond about that trust. But I do know from an investigative standpoint, a lot of the police officers and specifically our staff who went through this training had said, if I had known this 25 years ago, our investigations may have turned out to be differently because I would have asked questions in a different manner. And that was very hard for some of them to process.
That's a great point in terms of maybe the more long-term impacts might be coming out when it comes to these types of trainings. Very hard to codify what trust means definitions-wise. Looks like we have one more question in the chat here. Can this be brought to Saskatchewan Police College? Instructions, municipal police services are trained and interacted with many First Nations peoples in all municipalities. When it comes to cultural competency, I think that question more or less looking at if this type of training could potentially be supporting other areas when it comes to providing maybe the blueprint for other, if there's other First Nations in the prairies per se who might be interested in helping to support these types of trainings, if there might be any partnership opportunities in other regions, I guess, when it comes to expanding. Obviously, it's potentially difficult to expand, but has there been any interest in potential expansion across the country?
So we just have been having some conversations internally, and that's why also we wanted to have the gathering, was because we felt that it's a conversation that needs to continue. So understanding the relationship between Indigenous people and the police and trauma that occurs, you know, one of our facilitators put it greatly. It's like, you might have the best intentions of going into a call and dealing with an Indigenous person or anyone, but you don't know what that person has experienced before. You don't know if it was, you know, a bad situation in which they're coming from or their family member has come from. And actually, I just had a call today with an individual who's coming and going to be a keynote at our gathering in the fall. And she said, you know, I was terrified of the police because I saw what they had done in our community. And she said, it took me a long time to process that and to understand that they're actually there for our safety and to be trusted advocates for that. So it's understanding those stories and understanding the experiences of people that, you know, has been really impactful and helpful.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. It looks like we just have a few more questions in the chat for Taylor, as I know you're having some time constraints today, so I don't want take up too much. Have you and your team there, Taylor, looked at any measurements when it comes to changing officers' interaction with Indigenous peoples? Again, large topic, very generalizable, but maybe any general feedback from individual officers when it comes to their interactions with Indigenous communities, people?
So I think because we police the 6 First Nations here, a large part of their interactions is consistently with Indigenous people. But I will say what it has taught them is essentially empathy. A lot of them responded like, I understand how to be more empathetic when I'm dealing with people or when I'm dealing with the same person day in and day out. And I know that they don't have the supports that maybe I have. You know, their family members may have went to residential school and they didn't have necessarily, you know, someone to look after them, and they ended up on the street, or, you know, they're living or they're homeless at this point in time. And I need to just be more mindful of that as I move forward and deal with them. So those were some of the feedbacks that we were getting within the evaluation, and sort of just looking at it from a very eye-opening experience for our employees within the police service.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, especially that point of empathy being so crucial and key for those contexts, especially when officers are interacting with community members. I think that's probably all the questions we have in terms of being put into the chat. Oh, 1 sec. Looks like Shirley is back.
Now can you hear me?
We can hear you, Shirley. Thank you
Okay.
so much. Great. We'll give
Taylor,
you this.
I'm so grateful to have you here and to speak to us about what I find so interesting is the survival brain. That's just a concept that makes so much sense, and it covers so much about conduct of Indigenous people in dealing with the police. Some months ago, I discovered a book. I don't know if you're aware of it. It's called Peace and Good Order by Harold Johnson, and it just opened my eyes so wide in understanding what the kind of history that Indigenous people have had with police. It's a must read. I think everybody at the coalition has read it. As soon as I read it, I had to recommend it. So I'm just telling you about it so that you have a look at it. I think you will find it has a lot. It works a lot in what you have said. It works very well with what you have given us here today. Harold Johnson was a lawyer, an Indigenous lawyer. And he died just barely a year ago. But this book is amazing.
Oh, thank you for that. I haven't heard of that book, but I have heard of Harold Johnson, and I will take a look at that.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Shirley, for being able to hop back on and figure out the technical things.
Yes.
But I also want to say a large thank you to Taylor for sharing your knowledge about the program and the wonderful training that you and your team have been able to put together there to help to support the work of improving that relationship with the police. And then also when it comes to, I think is really interesting in that element of mental health as well as looking after one's own health, working in community and working in different settings for officers. So thank you so much, Taylor. Chimagwichnyawa for your time and for offering your knowledge when it comes to the program. I think everybody here is so thankful for you being able to serve as one of the speakers today.
Oh, thank you. And I will be able to hop on a little bit later, but camera will be off at that time.
Okay.
You guys.
Awesome. Thank you.
So, Jason, can I just suggest this, that Taylor has to leave? We know that she has childcare, but she's coming back. And I know we have 2 questions, one from Terry Anderson, one from Mario. And can we do this when she comes back? Because I know she has to leave. Is that fair to everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much, Taylor.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much, Taylor. Thank you, John and Dave there for helping out behind the scenes there as the very conscientious individuals when it comes to overseeing the technological stuff behind the scenes. But I want to introduce our second wonderful speaker here, Chief Harley Chappell. the chief of Simiamo First Nation and traditional knowledge carrier, as well as trained circle facilitator with Quellistum Justice Program in Stolo Territory. Chief Harley currently serves as the chair of the Surrey Police Board. I will provide this time now for Chief Harley to have his time to offer us some knowledge when it comes to his work there in Surrey. Thank you so much.
Good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. First off, my name is Harley Chappell. My traditional name is Xwopokton, and I am the elected chief for Simiamo. I've been here, so let's take a little bit step back. I'm going to kind of go through a little bit of the atmosphere here in Surrey and the opportunity at hand. I imagine many of you are aware of the policing transition that's happening here in the city of Surrey. 5 years ago, the municipality made a choice to switch from the RCMP back to the municipal police service. Hence, I was requested by the province of British Columbia to be a director on the police board. So we've been at it for a little while. So I just wanted to kind of state that. The other thing I'd like to share is that City of Surrey has the highest urban Aboriginal population in Western Canada. Highest in the area of about 30,000 urban First Nations, as well as 3 land-based nations within the immediate territory. Simiamo being the only one within the confines of the municipality of the City of Surrey. So I just kind of leave a little bit of context for that. And we are a very small nation. We are only 100 members. We only have about 40 on reserve. We're doing a whole bunch of work to bring a bunch back, but we're a very small community. You know, the one thing that I'll be honest, I'll just be very frank. I was asked to speak about our Indigenous strategy that we're developing through Surrey Police Service. And I may touch on that a little bit, but when I got the ask to be here today, it said, speak from your heart. Be yourself, be here. Why are you here? And you know, and I got asked early in my time, both as a director and now as chair of police board, Surrey Police Service, that they're like, why are you here? You know, given the history between First Nations and policing agencies, what are you doing here? And my answer was simple. I grew up in an environment where I did not like police. Police were not friendly to us. If police came into the reserve, bad things were happening. It was never a good interaction. It was never that. And growing up on reserve in Simiamo, very urbanized. We're in a very urbanized setting here. We're adjacent right to both City of Surrey and City of White Rock. And south of us is, if you could see back there, you'd be seeing Washington State. We're right on the Trans-boundary First Nation. But I say that because of the issues and the concerns, because of this long-standing bad relationship. I'll just say, you know, it's so simple that when I grew up in Simiamo, you know, that I always say that yellow stripe meant either go the other way or run. It wasn't welcoming. It wasn't something. And me as an elected leader, as aging, and obviously seeing my children, I understand the relationship that's needed between police and First Nations communities. Whether that's First Nations on reserve or First Nations within an urban setting, there needs to be a very good relationship there. And I'm saying that word of relationship. You know, we talked of trauma-informed practice. We talked of, I like the thought on our last speaker of culturally informed practice. I really like that. And those are my objectives. My goal is, in this work that we do, is to try to work with our police to develop and understand different ways of working with nations. I'll always use the example of our former FNP, and he came to us through the tripartite agreement. And it took a few years. We really kind of had to work with him. And at first he wasn't welcomed by the community at all. At all, he was not welcome. And once he was able to work through the history, work through that trauma, him being an Indigenous man himself, he really had the opportunity to connect with our community members. And it took quite a while. I'll say it took probably 2 to 3 years before the relationship really started to grow and blossom and became what it did. Unfortunately, what happened with that officer in particular is because of his skill set, because of the skills that he carried in being able to do this work with Indigenous communities, he was sought after in many different areas. being RCMP, he can be seconded to different areas. So it really broke down the relationship between us and our local nation, or our local detachment. Anyway, moving forward to Surrey Police Service. The first thing that we really had to do was develop an Indigenous strategy. And that really talked of trauma-informed practice, relationships, connection, community-based policing. And I was so pleased and so happy when we hired our police chief, Norm Lipinski, onto SPS. His model that he was bringing to Surrey was my apologies, community-based policing. So being able to appoint in the long term, this is the other piece too. So here in Surrey, when we were, SPS has taken over police of jurisdiction as of November 2024. So we are just brand new into this, and we're just kind of getting our feet wet. And what will this look like? But when that transition happened, one of my important pieces that we had to have a discussion of, both at the board level and here at I have two hats. I wear one as leader at my nation, and I'll take that one off and I'll put my board hat on, because sometimes those might not match and they might not fit well. And so I'm okay with doing that. But here in discussions with the leadership at SPS, police chief and such, we really got into the importance of relationships. The importance that we can't have a police officer coming in and building all these relationships within, whether it's our community here or whether it's the urban. So within Surrey, we also have 5 urban First Nations housing projects. So there are 5 different projects, housing facilities within Surrey. And I'm telling our officers, you need to get out there and you need to connect. You need to build a relationship before everything else. And I kind of laugh, because here in the reserve, I always say you need to connect with the res aunties. Those ones, they know everybody's business and they know everything that's getting along, and they are the gatekeepers to our community. They are, whether we like that or not, whether we agree with it, that is a reality. We have our aunties, we have our elders, they're the gatekeepers. If they allow us to say, okay, this person's a safe, comfortable person to be with, and we open our hearts and our minds to them, that's our thing that we've done. So I wanted to share a little bit of that. So the real important piece that I find in our community policing is the relationships. You know, one thing we saw here in the past was a little bit of a training facility through the city of Surrey. It was so diverse. It had so many things going on. It has First Nations. It has its own challenges with crime. But we really saw kind of a revolving door. And really that was one of the things that we need at SPS. I needed to stress to our leadership that needs to change. If we truly want to work through this fun thing called reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, we need to be able to connect with them. I make it a very simple phrase. When I put my leadership, my chief hat on, my elected leadership hat on, I say it's very simple. Nothing about us without us. If you're out there as police and you're doing works and you're working into new initiatives and new direction, we want to be beside you. We want to be right there with you. We need to have, I always say, when we have our hands in these works, then our fingerprints are on it. Then our children recognize that, and our people recognize those things. It's being able to open the door maybe to a little bit different way of doing work, and that's okay. It's a little bit different. It's not just policing, and we say that all the time. This is not just about policing. It's about community connections and relationships. And so really when we talk about our Indigenous strategy at SPS, the number one thing that we talk about is relationships. Get out there to the urban organizations, get out there to the Métis organizations, get out there to the First Nations organization. And we do have an Inuit organization now within our area, but get out and start talking. Get out and let them see your face, let them hear your voice, let them know who you are. That's where we start. And unfortunately, that's not always where we begin. We unfortunately, a lot of the times where we have individuals or community members or band members, their interaction is with an officer, not at the governance level. So it's being able to back that up and really, so working, I don't want to say from a top down, because I really think it's from a grassroots place where we need to, you know, a lot of our officers now, They're trained in trauma-informed practice. They're trained and orientated on Siniamo practice, definitely. They're trained and orientated. I will say probably not enough. No, I could say all of them is not enough, but it's a step in the right direction. It's moving the needle in that right direction. And, you know, for me, through the Indigenous strategy, really, you know, it's the consultative piece that is so important, because as we walk into this and the opportunity that we have in Surrey through the development of Surrey Police Service and the change here, we have a massive opportunity to do policing a little bit differently. We still have the tripartite agreements. In our situation, we'll have a quadpartite agreement. So I think we'll have 5 signatories that will end up signing on that. But it's realizing and understanding the historic relationship and understanding and moving that needle forward. And it's not going to jump. You know, it's not going to jump from 1 to 15 to 20 in one generation. It's not going to happen. And that's okay. I've seen it, you know, I always say in my community, I went from that place growing up here as a young man, as a child, to where police were not, you know, even welcomed into the community. And there was a real friction between police. And that is so unfortunate, because I've heard of horrible atrocities happening in reserves because of that other reserves, because of that lack of relationship. So for us, the Siniamo and our leadership, we know that. We see that, and we have to have that relationship. We have to be able to bring those resources and supports to our community members with trust, with openness, with honesty, and to be able to genuinely do that from here. You know, so it's changing the work a little bit, and it's, you know, I always just remind people, don't forget to care. Like, don't forget to care. I do it all the time. I get caught up in stress and the busyness of life, and I kind of just go through the motions of it. And I kind of stop a lot of our officers. I say, don't forget to care. Like, you know, this is your home. And one of the beautiful things that I will say is I've done all the orientations, and even in our orientations that we do with our new police officers, all of the new officers that are hired on, whether they're new officers, whether they're experienced officers, or whether they're civilian, we bring them through an orientation. We bring them through a swearing-in ceremony. And part of that swearing-in ceremony, I perform one of our ceremonies with them. So I walk them through that, and I really just share that this is a reciprocal relationship. And for me to have an expectation that police are going to do this in this way, I need to be giving as well. I need to be teaching. I need to be informing. I need to allow for our people. And one of the things I will say that really got me when we hired on our police chief, when I was there, when we hired on Norman Lipinski, and I'll never forget when he came in, he goes, you know, policing's changing, policing's evolving, and it's growing. And he goes, and my vision of bringing police to the Surrey is we need more guardians and less warriors. And I went, yes. I said, now we're on the right track. Now we're here. Don't get me wrong. Surrey has its crime problem. Surrey has its issues that need to be addressed through that. I said, but we are the fastest growing municipality. We have a huge amount of immigration in our city. We need to open that diversity to that population, not the other way around. We can't expect them to form to us. They're here, and whether we like that or not. So we need to be fluid as a police service. We need to be actively out there. We need to be diverse, and we need to be, what can I say? We need to be adapt to be able to change to the needs of the people. I'm going to say that again. We need to be able to adapt to change the needs of the people. And I say that because I don't know, I'm very fortunate because I gave up cable TV 3 or 4 years ago. I don't watch the news. I'm a much happier person these days because of it. And, but, you know, I always use the situation of homelessness and how we see the rise of homelessness in our areas, and how do we address that issue? Is that a policing issue? No. Is that a mental health issue? Is it a combination of the both? Yes. Right. It's being able to expand our perspective, expand our visioning to meet the needs of the people that call Surrey home. All involved, all of those ones. You know, it's the opportunity to be able to pull back a little bit, look at what's going on from that very new slate, and now go, okay, how can we do this? So when we began the discussion around our indigenization strategy, I suggested to the deputy chief, go out and start hitting and connecting with all those Indigenous organizations. Go out and just start shaking hands and kissing babies. Go out and just show face. Go out and get to know them. And then we'll come back together. And then we'll come again. And then we'll come again. And we're going to keep coming back. And they're going to get sick of us. And then finally we're going, I hope we're doing the work that you want us to do. If we are truly a community-based police service, then we need to be doing that work from the community level. So it is an extraordinary opportunity. It's an extraordinary opportunity with the transition that's happening. And have we flushed it out all the way? No, we haven't. We've just dipped our toe in this. We're only into this for the past 9 months now. And we have to do the work. I can't express the importance of me not going to my officers and saying, here, I need you to study this about Semiahmoo. No, I need to bring you out here to my community. I need to introduce you to my community members and my leadership and my elders. And I need to say, here's who you are and thank you. An example of that, with this transition of our First Nations police officer, we now with Surrey Police, we brought on one new officer, and he's our FMP for our reserve. As an introductory for him, we have salmon fishing here on the Fraser River. We do our communal salmon fishing every year. And I said, come with us. And he kind of went, oh, what? No, I can't. It's not policing. And I said, come with us. Come with us. It was actually our band manager who'd been on council for quite a while. She said, you really need to come with us. If you want to meet and know our people, meet and know our people. If you want our people to trust you, then you need to be trustworthy and you need to be in the community. And he came. And he enjoyed himself. I talked to community members and some of the people that were there after. They're like, how did you like him? He's a great guy. He's a great guy. So it was a way to break the ice. He came, no uniform. This is who I am, and this is why I'm here. And it started that relationship off on the right foot. I always think that pre SPS, and I'm not here or there. I really like the idea of a community-based policing, but I when we were here with under the jurisdiction of the RCMP, I couldn't count on one hand how many OICs we've had over the years, how many new OICs have come in, and I'm going, hey, we're working on consistency over here, and leadership keeps changing, mandates keep changing, direction keeps changing. We're kind of going, no, and we had to fight as leadership. It was great, and we were grateful because we had to do some work locally to be able to keep our FMP here in the reserve, not to allow him to get kind of dragged off in too many different directions. So those are learning lessons that we've done as Semiahmoo that we bring to the new opportunity with SPS, and include all of this relationship-based work that I expect our officers to know. I expect our officers to buy into. But I really do say that because this is our community, and I always use the example of how old and long that even, I use this as an example. Sometimes we're really good at following our elders' leads and our elders' direction, and I use a story and the analogy. Sometimes we're a little too good at it. We just got to follow along. And I remember, hearing that generations ago, when police obviously assisted with, when you heard it before, the bringing of children to residential school. That was a stain that left on that relationship right from the get-go. But I use this as an example because I come across young people that I don't like the police. When I ask why? Okay, maybe bad interaction, maybe this, maybe that, but maybe they were just in a situation like I was, where I was in an environment that didn't like them. And I asked, I said, we have to realize that in moving that needle forward, we have to take our piece as well. We can't just be pointing the finger. Because I always use the example. I had one of my elders explain it to me in this way. They said, sometimes we need to think through what we believe and what we understand. Because her daughter, every year, should make a pot roast. And this is how our elders taught us too. So it's kind of, she goes, every year they'd make a pot roast. My daughter would cut both ends off of her pot roast, put it in her cup, and away it goes. And her mom said, why do you cut the ends off your pot roast? She goes, I don't know, Grandma did it, and I do it, and that's the way it is. And mom said, okay, fair enough. A little while later, she bucks the end off her pot roast and puts it in the oven. She goes, why do you do that? So they call up Grandma. They're like, Grandma, why do you cut the ends off your pot roast? And she goes, well, I only got a real little tiny pot roaster, so I had to cut the ends off so it fit. But unknowingly, the granddaughter had followed this teaching of her mother, of her grandmother. And it really had nothing to it, right? So when I encounter our young people and doing things like we have, I forgot the name. It was the RCMP program that we had here. It was the cadets program. And we're looking at doing a cadets program with SPS as well, just to start building that bridge. We know in our recruitment that we've had very few Indigenous applicants. And how do we start to entice and bring people in? Well, we know that we got to start getting them young. We got to start getting them in high school, getting straight out of high school and straight into the Justice Institute, and working within the community. You know, that is the next goal. The first goal is let's break down some of the barriers. Let's address the elephant in the room. Let's do that. And once we get there and we're all okay with that, then we can start putting those pieces back together. And that's where we're at now. Very much putting those pieces back together with the discussions of local Indigenous communities, local First Nations, and we're putting those pieces back together. Because again, when I say that, when I assist in building something, my fingerprints, my handprints, my elders' handprints are on it. And when I look at it, I'm like, ooh, I kind of see myself in there. It's not a mandate that's been given to me from Ottawa and saying, you need to do this. We know kind of how those don't always work, but you know, I just wanted to share a little bit. And I didn't want to prepare a big document today because I just wanted to have a little bit of a conversation. So I know there's a couple questions out there. I see that from Armand, and I'll let Jason kind of do that. I've been going for 20 minutes. I think I'll do 10-minute Q&A, call it a day.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chief Chappell. That was such an amazing talk. I think just getting back down to connections with community, officers being out in the community, making those in-person connections. I love the story about going salmon fishing, where the officer was a little hesitant and then had such a wonderful time to break down those kind of barriers when it comes to officers feeling as though maybe they don't feel comfortable making those connections, but the connections are so key and so important. But anyways, we do have a fair amount of questions, so I'll move over to the individual who seems to be raising their hand for a while here. And I do apologize if I mispronounce your name, but I believe Prabut, sorry. If you could unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Sure. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, it's Prabhu Rajan, and thanks very much, Chief Chappell, for your presentation. That was really, really excellent. As Mr. Castle kindly mentioned earlier, I'm the Police Complaint Commissioner for BC. So you and I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet. I'm hoping to come up and meet with your police board sometime soon, because as you mentioned, there's a lot of work to be done with the RCMP transition to the Surrey Police Service. And and I recognize that our office has a lot of work to do to make our services known to your community. And I guess picking up, you had mentioned, that we need to adapt to meet the needs of the people. So I'm looking for your advice in terms of awareness of my office. And if you don't know, or those of you who aren't aware, we are responsible for the oversight of all misconduct investigations involving municipal police officers in British Columbia, which now includes SPS officers. And you mentioned 30,000 Indigenous community members within Surrey. As you can imagine, we get very few complaints from Indigenous peoples, and I know there's lots of reasons for that. But my hope is that we can connect more with the Indigenous community within Surrey, and obviously in all our areas of jurisdiction. And I was hoping for for your advice, now and hopefully in the future, as to what work we can do to make our very colonial, very Western, and frankly, a part of the systemic racism within the justice system, how we can make our services more adaptable, how we can make our services more accessible. What work can I do? What can my office do to connect better with the community, Indigenous community within Surrey? So, long question. I'm mindful of the time, but I felt it incumbent on me to ask you that while I have you. Thank you.
Dennis is coming fishing. Thank you for your question. I think the thing is that people don't know who you are, right? Even me here, as I've kind of walked down this path with SPS and the board, I kind of go, oh, okay, I know who it is. I've learned that. I've been able to articulate that, share that with my leadership, but it's not, I don't think it's well known out there in general public. So it just very well may be a conversation with the board as we are talking about kind of a little bit of, I don't want to say PR, but kind of, because even now transitioning from an RCMP model to a community-based model, there's a lot of our citizens within the city of Surrey that don't know the role and responsibility of the police board. So even us getting that out to community that don't, and even this, don't call the mayor anymore, call us, right? The mayor's office doesn't need to be getting all those things. We are the entity to be doing, to be handling this. And then the relationship with the municipality as well. I think it's just good to come out and have a conversation. Because I know Jason's been reaching out to you quite a bit, as well as Chief Lipinski, but we had a few. But I think the best thing to do is just come out, and we have to start looking at how do we get our voice and our name out there. And I think it might be a good way to be able to kind of piggyback on that.
Well, I do think that obviously police boards are also responsible for oversight. So we share that role and that goal for improved public confidence in policing. So I would of course be happy to do anything jointly, but certainly I will take that as an invitation to.
It is 100%.
I would be happy to meet with you and your fellow board members and wanting to make more inroads in Surrey. And I think it's important for all oversight agencies. And I think my colleague Jessica Berglund is also on this call. She is the director of the Independent Investigations Office in British Columbia. So, we look forward to spending more time in Surrey because it is a bit of a litmus test in terms of this transition. So I look forward. Thank you.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that's a great connection to make there. And Chief Harley Chappell, again, talking about that idea of just being out there and making those connections that maybe sometimes haven't always been comfortable, making those connections, police boards, oversight, those types of things. Looks like a few other questions in the chat here from John and Clara, just kind of making some connections for questions that are similar. Is it about officers being out in the community and socializing? Is there more? And also, is it important for officers to be out connecting with First Nation, Métis, Inuit organizations out of uniform? Do you feel like that helps to make an influence as well when it comes to improving that relationship in the long term?
I think it is. I think it is just really putting faces to names. And obviously the plain clothes is always a help. I think there's time and place for both, right? And I think we'd all agree there's time and place for both. And we leave that to their discretion. We tell them, you don't always have to come here in uniform. Come here as a human being as well. And that's one of the things that I appreciate and I implore our officers to do is to allow them to be a little bit human here. We're dealing with humans. Let's be a little bit human. Don't just kind of put the face on and away we go. And I heard that word the decolonize. Good luck, right? This industry, I don't even know what we call it. This work that we do of policing is not Indigenous. It's not Indigenous, right? So I say very much same with the child family services industry, right? Industry. How do you decolonize something that was developed to colonize? Let's go there. Let's go there. The police in this country were used as a tool to colonize historically, So, it's really hard to flip that switch now, because that's what it was. Child Family Services, that's what it was. And the impacts to Indigenous people may have been different from other demographics, but that's what it is. So to be able to draw that back, how do we do that? I don't know. I don't know. I'll just be very frank and very honest. I don't know how to do that because of the origin that it comes from. Right? I'll leave it at that. If that answers that question.
That's a great point, especially this idea of, I think sometimes people think it could be a box to check, think, oh, we've decolonized, but realistically, as you talk about, Chief Chappell, the institution itself is what the institution is, being formulated to control and to carry out colonial mindsets, worldviews. Anyways, I want to get to a few more questions here in the chat. I see Armand has had your hand raised for a bit there, so I'll leave it here for Armand to ask your question there, please.
Thank you, Jason. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Fantastic. Chief Chappell, I just want to say thank you for your passion and for your insight here as well. It was fantastic to listen to you. And I did a PhD on peace response to First Nation occupations and protests. And one of the comments that you made was extremely intriguing. And that was, we need more guardians versus warriors. And I did a deep dive into that whole concept of guardians versus warriors during my research, and touched on the research of Kyle McLean and Scott Wolf. And it picks up on a comment that Clara Renault made in the comment here as well about the police uniforms can be triggering. And since I retired from 37 years in policing 15 years ago, we've seen an incredible transformation in what police officers look like on the street today. What they look like today compared to what I looked like when I first joined in 1973 and retired in 2010, they look like our emergency response team officers now. The general patrol officer does. And part of the research that I did into the Ipperwash inquiry, one of the recommendations is that officers responding to First Nation occupations and protests not be dressed in tactical gear. They wear their uniform of the day. And part of the issue too, and you mentioned warriors versus guardians, is that you need to recruit for guardians. You need to hire for guardians. You need to train for guardians, and you need to acknowledge and promote guardian style policing versus warrior or tactical style policing, or it all comes undone. And as you know, the culture within policing is quite dramatic in that it can change somebody that you hire that has those guardian instincts very quickly into that warrior or tactical instinct. I'd just like some feedback from you on that, Chief Chappell.
Sorry, I don't. What do you want my feedback on? I didn't catch. I got your talk, but I didn't catch it.
Yeah, the whole process of hiring, and whether somebody can change that you hire that has that specific mindset that wants to do what most First Nation police services do, and that's peacekeeping, and that's building relationships that sustain over time versus how policing within municipal or non-Indigenous sector actually carry out their duties.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that I love, and I love seeing in, as I was saying, I've been doing the orientations for SPS since the beginning, the new staff orientation and the new staff swearing in. Well, not the orientation, the swearing in, my apologies. And one of the things I love hearing within the orientation is they will say, Chad Harris, born and raised in Surrey, Sook, born and raised in Surrey, moved to Surrey when he was 7 years old, born and raised in Surrey. And I'm going, yes, these are the people that we want because they care about our community. They're part of our community. There are guardians within our community, and they care about our community. They're not just here for a shift or a period of time, and then they're moving away. They're planning on being here until they retire. So that gives the opportunity to anchor, and I mean truly anchor, some of this work in those officers and in the service, because we have an understanding that we have officers here that are going to be here for the next 10, 15 years. So in recruiting, so as the culture begins to shift, as that mindset and that mentality starts to shift, then I'm not just in and out the door here in Surrey. I'm here for the next, till the day I decide to take this uniform off. That begins to change the culture. That begins to change the shift. We're not all of a sudden worrying about, we're always worried about recruiting. We're always looking to recruit. But now it's going, okay, now that we're changing the culture within the service, now that the culture is changing within the service, how do we start to expose that and share that to people that, hey, we've already tried to do this, we've changed it. Hopefully you start to see some differences in the community. And now, hey, we want you to be part of this. And that's part of the Indigenous strategy in the recruitment aspects of that. We're not quite there yet, but that is definitely I think what happened is in our neck of the woods, the table got flipped and all this went crazy for a little while. And politically and locally, and it just kind of went everywhere. And right now we're just finally starting to see that dust settle. After POJ in November, it took 6-8 months. Right now, we're just starting to see that dust settle. And we're going, okay, now it's time to go. Because we have another 1.5 years till the transition's complete, 1.5 years to 2 years till the transition's complete. And when it's there, and when all those programs, we're doing frontline first. We're always doing frontline. We'll start filling some of the programs and things as we work along. But we're not there yet, which is okay, which is all right. And I appreciate even this conversation because it starts flooding back for me to go, oh, we got to pick this back up because we are, we're running down the field full speed here. And it's good. Oh.
No, I think that's such a great answer there, Chief Chappell, when it comes to just kind of coming back to these kind of conversations around policing, because it's just a long-term journey of these discussions. So it looks like we have 2 more questions. Dan had a question there in the chat a while ago in regards to SPSF regarding Indigenous officers. How many Indigenous officers are currently working there for SPS? And then how does the SPS recruit or focusing on recruiting Indigenous officers? And is there an Indigenous specifically focused unit there in Surrey?
There is, we are building that out. So our first officer to our Indigenous unit was our FNP. So getting an officer into Semiahmoo as the only land-based nation, that was the first one. From here now, we have another position coming up ASAP that we're looking to fill. We aren't getting the Indigenous recruits that we wanted. We're not getting them. I'll be very frank. We're not getting them. So we have discussed, oh, hang on. Something's trying to shut me down. I'm shutting down in 1 minute, it says. So if I close off, I'll join right back in, but it just said it'll shut me down in 1 minute. We'll see. No, we don't have the numbers for Indigenous officers. Yes, we will begin an Indigenous focused recruiting process as we start to go. But right now, we're just kind of trying to get these seats filled so that we can complete as much of the transition before we start being specific with programs and services that are available within the service. So we're not quite there yet.
Okay.
As for officers I want to say 20 from the last. I don't have my recruitment obviously material in front of me, but I want to say it's in the area of 20, which is not enough. Well, one of the assistant deputies, Mike Lesage, is Indigenous. So it is nice seeing an Indigenous person at the
looks like Chief Chappell might be rejoining us here in a few moments, I believe, as it seems like he's dealing with some technical items on his end when it comes to connections. But with that said, as I think John and Dave were kind of running up against a little bit of time here.
I think we are, but if we can, Terry Anderson had waited quite a while, but only if he's still with us. If Terry Anderson's there, there's Terry. Yeah, go ahead, Terry.
I am back. Harley is back.
Oh, good, thanks. Go ahead, Terry. I see, Terry, you're on mute.
There we go. Thank you. I'm just very moved, Harley, by everything that you said. And you and I lived so close together. I lived in White Rock for 25 years and spent many times walking the trails of the Semiahmoo in that whole area through the forests, and I always was aware of the separation between the nation and the community, and how when I went onto the land and the trails, I always wondered, and I didn't connect with you, and I'm surprised we didn't connect because we live so close together. But this whole thing about guardian training is so important, and I think you're on top of it and you're planning it, and it's a wonderful thing. When I read the report that is preparations to this meeting, I was actually moved to tears because I never saw so much truth compressed and summarized, and I was just moved to tears because I realized the magnitude of what's happened. And I spent 38 years training officers at the University of the Fraser Valley in guardian skills. And I spent 1,400 hours doing ride-alongs with them, and I supervised all of their 360-hour field practices in multiple agencies all over the Fraser Valley and Lower Mainland. And I know that we're moving in the right direction. I know that those skills are powerful and that they equip officers to do that kind of community connection that you're talking about. And so I'm encouraged on the one hand that the opportunity is there for the learning to take place. And on the other hand, the need is so great. So thank you for today.
Thank you.
And for this connection.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Terry, for that very important comment. And as well, I want to thank Chief Chappell for providing us your knowledge and just firsthand perspectives on policing there in Surrey as the transition continues. But I just want to applaud you when it comes to just that crucial work that you're doing there, when it comes to just focusing on the relationships of police and just highlighting that need for being in the community and being out and making those important relationship connections, if it's salmon fishing, if it's out in the community, and just trying to be more of a positive force. And I also am taking notes of your other comment when it comes to disabling my cable box. So I might do that as well going forward. But thank you so much again, Chimagwich for your time today. And we'll move on to our final, which I'm really honored and so thankful that our final speaker, Gina Nagano, has provided us her time and expertise. As Gina has been a really wonderful, amazing support for me when it comes to my PhD program that I just finished. But Gina Nagano is a Tranjek-Gwitchin First Nation citizen, CEO of House of Wolf Associates, nationally recognized leader, Indigenous-led public safety, justice reform, and community-driven policy development programs. And before Gina's wonderful work at CEO of House of Wolf and Associates, Inc., Gina had a 21-year career with RCMP. And I just want to say it's so amazing that we've been focusing on guardianship and this idea of moving guardians, because Gina has been doing some amazing work around improving training to support this idea of moving towards this idea of guardians. All right, I'll leave it to Gina here. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional territory that I'm presenting on, the Kwalendon First Nation and Ta'an-Kwachin Council here in Whitehorse, Yukon Territory. I'd like to thank the Coalition for Canadian Police Reform for inviting me to present today. The President, Dave Castles, John Libby, and other CCPR colleagues. Thank you, Jason, for moderating, and to my other two prior guest speakers, Chief Harley Chappell. Thank you very much. Beautiful background. Wow, that's incredible work you're doing, and also the work that Taylor Sane is doing in Northern Ontario. I'm Gina Nagano. I'm Chanie First Nation. I'm from Dawson City, Yukon. I'm from the Wolf Clan on my mother's side. The Nagano side is my father, who is Japanese. I'm speaking to you today as the CEO of House of Wolf and Associates, an Indigenous-owned consultancy firm I founded that is dedicated to supporting Indigenous approaches to safety, justice, and healing. Before my 20 years work of House of Wolf, I spent 21 years in the RCMP, serving many Northern Indigenous communities, and I retired out of headquarters, Ottawa, under National Aboriginal Policing Services, where I did policy and programs. That experience showed me again and again for what wasn't working in policing, especially for our people. I founded House of Wolf because I saw and heard from many other First Nations in Yukon that we were tired of having safety defined for them instead of by them. At House of Wolf, we do not replicate and tweak the colonial systems. Instead, we support Indigenous communities in designing their own pathways and systems to safety, healing, and accountability. We specialize in what we call social justice infrastructure. This means building community-led, trauma-informed programs that address root causes of harm like intergenerational trauma, poverty, and systemic neglect. During my 20 years with the RCMP, I saw a system that wasn't built for us as Indigenous people. Officers were often in and out of communities, and I was one of them, responding to calls after a crime occurred with no time or mandate to build long-term trust. There was little to no culturally relevant training or understanding of the community histories we were stepping into. Even basic information couldn't be shared with the communities, not even when it was their own information about their own people. So much of what we were doing was enforcement focused in communities that were already living in trauma. And I say this, you can't police your way out of trauma. This wasn't about the failings of individual officers, although that did happen at many times because many officers did not understand the complex and traumatic history between Indigenous people in Canada and the RCMP, which was used as a tool of forced assimilation and violence. But this was failing, to me, was clearly a structural issue. Policing in this country was born from colonial policies of control. It was never built to support Indigenous wellness or self-determination. And I often say in many of my presentations, it's like, if you ever hear of it being, diametrically opposed, these two ends will never come together. So we asked, what would safety look like if it was defined by the community? House of Wolf was created to fill the gaps I saw in policing by focusing on prevention, relationships, and Indigenous self-determination in safety. When my company engages with a community, we begin with a community risk and protective factor analysis. This is a structured engagement process that maps out local drivers of harm and protective strengths. It helps the community understand not just what's happening, but why. Based on that, we work with local leadership to co-design social justice infrastructure. These are custom, community-specific programs that address root causes like trauma, poverty, and disconnection. Everything is tailored to the nation's governance and cultural practices. We then move into program development and implementation planning, where we co-create deliverables like a 5-year strategic plan, program manuals, and role and job descriptions for community-based teams like guardians or wellness responders. Our core phase is training and capacity building. We train community members in things like trauma-informed response, cultural safety, conflict resolution, and crisis de-escalation. This training prepares local people to act as community safety guardians, bridging gaps in services and prevention. Finally, we provide ongoing system navigation and policy support. This includes helping with MOUs with police or health systems, funding proposals, reporting frameworks, and evaluation tools. We don't just design programs, we stay involved to make sure they survive, scale, and adapt over time. The Community Safety Guardian Program, or Community Safety Guardian Program, CSG, is one of the clearest expressions of what community-led safety can look like in action. Community Safety Guardians are not a police service, and this program is not meant to recreate failed colonial systems. Police are necessary in that they are the agency to investigate crimes. They do not prevent crime. They are not reactionary to crime. Guardians are not law enforcement officers. They are local people trained and rooted in the values, language, and needs of their nation. The role is visibility, prevention, connection, and trust, not control. We'd love to see them eventually recognized as police officers, but not mirror the police, but to provide them stable funding and authority instead of constantly changing pilot grants. Guardians act as a bridge between the community and outside systems, including the RCMP. A connector between at-risk individuals and services. A protector, but in a way that reflects traditional Indigenous values where systems and where safety and accountability are held collectively, not imposed from above. Traditionally, when someone caused harm in a community, the focus was on restoring balance, not casting people out. We couldn't afford to lose people then, and we still can't. Some of the examples of the program since 2017 here in the Yukon that we've started over the past 20 years. Kwalindun First Nation has approximately 6 or 7 community safety guardians. Selkirk First Nation, population 400, has 4 community safety guardians. Natchoonayak First Nation in the Yukon, we are just starting their program, designing, have 3 community safety guardians. Guardians are trusted. People open their doors to them. In Teslin, we have 2 matriarchal sisters that are 65 years plus. They call them the deadly aunties. And they're working at night with those who might otherwise be targeted by enforcement, offering connection, not punishment. They utilize their traditional ways, their traditional laws that's embedded in the program called Hakasti. And it goes back to their clan system. The people are accountable to their clan system. Communities report less fear, more collaboration, and a greater sense of ownership over their own safety. This isn't theory. This is already happening. The last part of my vision of what we're working on in the Yukon was to develop and design a community safety guardian training program. I am happy to report last week we launched our very first community safety guardian training program in collaboration with the Yukon University, where it's training over 6 months, 1 week per month. And it is also for the very first Yukon University to identify it as a micro-credential program. The program over the 6 weeks provides an in-depth about what is a community safety guardian, the program introduction. We talk about mental health first aid for Northern people. We talk about a community safety guardian's core values and professionalism. They go into trauma-informed care, harm reduction, applied suicide intervention skills training, de-escalating violent situations, standard first aid, CPR, incident command systems, field day, going out on the land. We get into guardian power, ethics, and law, evidence and documentation, trauma-informed interviewing, major incident practical exercises, courtroom and file management in the event they end up having to testify. They do things like ATV, skidoo skills, time and location training, vicarious trauma, strategies for resilience, group crisis intervention, which carries on for the 6 months, 1 week per month. I just want to say that the reflections on the CCR report, I just love it. You talk about the CCR report, towards trust and transformation confirms what many of us already know, that police need training on cultural competency, Indigenous histories, and the long legacy of policing as a tool of assimilation and violence. That self-determination and Indigenous-led policing must be the way forward. There must be real accountability with Indigenous policing, with Indigenous voices at the center of oversight and governance. There must be, House of Wolf isn't waiting for these recommendations to be adopted. As we hear it every day through the Truth and Reconciliation, all the police reports, the RCAP, etc. We're doing it and we're living it here today. Because we're not tweaking the colonial systems, what we're doing is we're reclaiming our Indigenous authority, our traditional justice ways. Guardianship isn't about enforcement. It's about restoring the balance, healing harm, and building the systems our communities actually need. If I leave you with one thought, it's this. Communities create safety. Communities carry the solutions. Our job is not to fix them. It's to support them in reclaiming what was already theirs. Thank you. Masicho.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Gina. That was such a great and important talk when it comes to yourself and your team there at House of Wolf, really doing the work and putting it in action right now, because there's so many of those reports, as you referenced there, from RCAP and many others that we know about that have made great recommendations, but sadly a number of reports just become pages on the shelf or something. But just knowing and hearing when it comes to the micro-credential coming on board, which is so amazing there at Yukon U, seeing as though folks are still kind of working in the chat here, do you feel as though the micro-credential could help when it comes to the next generation of maybe guardianship or guardians coming into the program for those specific First Nations across the Yukon that have formulated their own guardian programs?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times, we get into the universities and colleges and we're as an Indigenous-led design program, they look at us, here's a great certificate, be on your way, it's just stamped and left. But it was very important to work with a university to provide those micro-credentials, because in the long term, one of the things here in the Yukon is we have 11 out of 14 self-governing First Nations, and self-governing First Nations can actually in the future create their own courts, corrections, and policing. In the interim, the general laws of application apply. That's enforced by the federal, territorial, municipal policing. Not municipal policing, but federal territorial policing. So the micro-credentials allow the opportunity, say, for a community safety guardian to say, well, one day I want to be a community safety guardian officer, but what if I want to be a community safety, community land guardian, or renewable resource guardian? And we're exploring that now. How do we create what could possibly the foundation for an individual to go into say community safety guardian or land guardian or renewable resource guardian, etc. So as the foundation is built, we will get more and more interested applicants from Yukon. We've had Northern BC, so those that are in BC, Daly Denny Council, had sent 3 of their individuals that will be exploring a community safety guarding program in their traditional territory. within the Yukon U program.
No, that's wonderful to hear in terms of it being able to expand and help to support that next generation, especially at that university level, and also seeing that interest in other First Nations, Northern BC as well. Looks like we might have a question here, general comment in the chat here. Thinking about community, thinking about these types of programs, engaging public listening is so important. But thinking about who's responsible when it comes to let's see, bodies have been tasked with engaging public. Who is responsible when it comes to, I guess, engaging the public to raise awareness about these types of programs? I think that's what Janine, you were kind of focusing on. I don't know if you want to maybe try and clarify that a little bit. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go ahead, Jason? Yeah, no, really good questions. Thank you very much. You know, who's responsible when it comes to engaging the public, raising these programs is right now, because we're, if you go to houseofwolf.ca, there's our web link that would see the promotion of it, of course, social media. But House of Wolf is responsible with and in partnership with Yukon University. So as we collaborate and move forward, it's a partnership. And, you know, Chief, you talk about Harley, you talk about partnerships. That's important, right? If you want to get the eyes and ears of the movement of what we're doing is, you know, a good, healthy partner is the university that we are working with.
That's great. I'm going to jump in here, Jason. Sorry, I just wasn't quick enough to unmute. And I don't want to belabor the call for anybody who has to jump off. And certainly this is a bit outside of maybe the scope of today's discussion, but my perspective is purely from a civilian oversight and governance point of view. And I'm, you know, provincial in Ontario, and we have been long talking about connection with community, cultural sensitivity with respect to police training. And if that's where the comments previously were coming to. But at the end of the day, boards are set to, like, who's guarding the guardians, if you will, is kind of the mentality we use when it comes to civilian oversight. And my concern is we've been talking about this for a long time, but no one seems to be taking, let's say, the lead on this. So, you know, I love that. The police point their fingers at governance institutions, and governance institutions point the finger at policing. At the end of the day, in my opinion, it needs to be a collaborative strategy, but none of our governments are set up in order to dictate that approach. And so everybody's waiting for someone else to tell them what to do. And that's really, really frustrating. So I just wanted to hear comments, let's say from Gina and Harley specifically, on, you know, clearly you're taking an independent approach to this. And to me, the problem, although that's grassroots and probably has some effectiveness in your respective communities, to me, if we're really going to move the bar forward, this needs to be a larger conversation, and it needs to be governance, government, and policing all in the same room. That's really all I wanted to say. So apologies if that was long-winded.
No, Janina, that's a really good question. You know, we get challenged here in the Yukon quite a bit, and we don't have the RCMP senior leadership, and I would confidently say that truly support the program. You know, we do have the Minister of Justice. This is embedded within community safety, and what we're doing here is embedded within the Minister's Minister of Justice, under the Minister of the Missing, Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls, as a very important initiative to move forward. So politically, it's grounded there. Our challenge is the RCMP, who, I don't know, I think it's, and being a police officer, I know the mentality is us versus them.
Yeah.
And what happens is we said, okay, who's going to be the guardian? You know who it is? Where the strength is here in the Yukon is the First Nation government.
Excellent.
First Nation government are taking the lead. You know what the great thing and the success of this program is? They own it. They invested upfront financially, and they own it. Why not? We're self-governing First Nation, right? Why is it that the police at the end of the day say that we have to police your... No. Those days are over. I'm sorry. How we police our community in the North and Indigenous community, how we create it, is self-governing, and that's embedded in our agreements. So here's the question. I always get, oh, you know, from the RCMP, I hear it. I've got my contacts in the RCMP. Oh, that community safety officer program's a liability. Liability. So if they created a renewable resource program, they created a health and wellness program, is that a liability because it's created by a First Nation government? You know, they're not police officers. And then I go one more step and I said, you know what? Out of 8 surveys, when we go into communities, we do one-on-one surveys and community engagement surveys. When you get a survey that comes back from an entire community, 95%, they say they don't trust the police. They don't trust the RCMP in this day and age. That's a liability. When a woman cannot pick up the phone to call the RCMP for being assaulted or sexually assaulted, that's a liability. So I flipped the lens. And that's what we have to be mindful of in the North is the First Nations guard the guardians. And thank you for bringing that out because that's very important to know.
It's okay. So the next obvious question is when you're in a community that is culturally based under one culture, we'll say, and, you know, has, like Indigenous peoples do, some sovereignty in that approach. What are the lessons that we can learn when it comes to cultural oversight and moving towards community engagement and really listening and engaging and deploying what we learn inside of policing strategies and governance oversight? And that's, again, a really big question. I'm not looking to boil the ocean here. I'm just looking for some direction. You know, government talks a lot about oversight and governance. Unfortunately, they don't put any funding or guidelines or plans in place for that either. So like in Ontario, we're making some movement, but I'm very, very interested in this discussion and perhaps what we can do together. And of course, we as partners of CAPG have engaged in these discussions as well. So I don't want to overlook them as a partner in the conversation.
Yeah, no, really good question. You know, one of the things about governance and oversight is to work with your government. You know, you got some great government, you got some great, you know, I would say advocates that are there. And that's what I did here in Yukon. I worked with the ministers really closely. MMIWG, it's a national strategy. We're embedded in the national strategy. If you look at it within it, Yukon has taken a lead role under the Immersion of Missing Indigenous Women and Girls strategy that they developed. And it's embedded in there. Community safety is embedded. Each community and Yukon government, I'll hold my hands up to them, have provided funding to each First Nation, $200,000 to do a community safety plan. And here it is you got federal government. Did you know this? They were rolling out a community safety plan for the last 14 years under the MMIW, Murder Missing Women and Girls policy.
Yes.
And apparently they went to all these communities, but I've asked them when they came to the Yukon, I said, how many did you implement?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
None.
So it appears, at least from an optics point of view, we're listening, but we don't funnel that information back on how we're going to use it or where it has importance, or even we can't focus on that right now. We're going to put it out like, you know, in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah. So every community that we work with here in Yukon, we do an in-depth research with the community, you know, from a meta-analysis, gathering all the documents, and we work with the community right from the beginning, and we provide a community safety report back to the community on what we heard. We do that, and inside there's embedded what they identify as their priorities in their community. The RCMP can roll a national priority, say, oh, motor vehicle acts is a priority across Canada. Well, no, you know what? We have people dying in our communities for drug trafficking, you know, overuse addictions, but yet that's not in the freaking RCMP's priority.
Yeah. Well, and that's where we know that, you know, on a location by location, there has to be some sort of local action plan that connects, you know, to a larger strategic plan, but still accounts for the local community needs.
Yeah. So under community safety reports, born is the recommendations from the community and how to move them forward with them. And then born out of that priority was the Community Safety Guardian program. That was the very first one implemented in 2016, 2017 with the Kwalendon First Nation. When you take a community that, I'll give you the stats here. We're talking a little bit. In 1 year, this community is situated in Whitehorse, Yukon, population 31,000. It's embedded right here in the city. Police 365 days a year. 24/7, have two satellite RCMP officers in that community. 2015, they had 1,076 calls, 250 homes, 500 citizens living on there. They're only a kilometer by kilometer. I used to live up the road five minutes away, and they had 1,076 calls. 85% of those calls were alcohol, drug related, sexual assaults, domestic violence, all that. We started working with the community safety plan and what we've moved forward. And no kidding, in 2016, I sent an email to Inspector Archie Thompson. He was a great guy working with the RCMP back then. And he said, Gina, types it back because former Chief Doris Bill wants to know. He sent me a message back, email says 666. I go, no, Archie, I need it for the whole year. No, statistically, we dropped the number of police calls by 40% in 1 year. In 1 year. Why? Because what we've identified and learned was that the issues are not crime police issues. They're social issues that address back to the systemic problems of colonial history and the impacts. So we went in and we worked with the community to address it, got the community safety guardians on working. And this community was the worst community in the Yukon: trauma, crisis, poverty in our backyard, et cetera, et cetera. Guess what? This is what I'm eventually going to do my master's in. I finished my master's in community economic development, is that I transformed the entire community. In order to be successful, you can't transform 1, 2, 3, the entire community to the wealthiest community in Yukon, economically, independently, stable. And their people are healthy. They have the highest rates of their citizens coming to school, universities, the lowest rate of children in care. I think right now there's 0. Their social assistance is maybe down to 5 individuals. They hosted the Toronto Blue Jays Foundation in their community. They just finished building a $46 million administration building. They have 7 community safety officers. I hear citizens now from outside of Kwalendon, the subdivision. They're the safest community. So what I'm saying is that, don't get me wrong, there's always our 10%ers. There's always going to be 10% wrong in the community, but we flipped the lens. Where 90% was the problem in the community, that's what they saw. Now it's 10%. I'm just saying, whatever you have, Chief Harley, whatever, sorry, I can't remember her name, Taylor has, work it in your community. Don't let policies and other structures and governments stop you from what you're doing. You are sovereign First Nations. And we have to take that back because our people have to be accountable and responsible for ourselves. And that's what we did. We took back that accountability, responsibility, and the policing days of, if they're not going to work with us, then you know what? That's okay. Because you know what? Your 23 contract expires pretty soon, but I'm not, and we're not taking it. The communities here in the Yukon are saying enough's enough. So thank you for that question, Janine.
Wow, that was such an amazing answer there, Gina. And I think that's just such a key point when it comes to raising that awareness to the outside, when it comes to respecting and acknowledging the importance of self-determination needs to be front and center when it comes to the future, as police services acknowledging, having that respect for programs, policies, initiatives that are self-determined, that are needing to be respected and partnered with in that nation-nation relationship. I will leave it to Dave and John here. I don't know how much time we have left there, Dave.
Yeah, no, Harley has a comment, and then I'd like to conclude if we could, only in the best interest of time. Please, Harley.
I just have I have 2 comments to make. We heard loud and clear this today, the need for relationships. And I'm saying this because there's no cookie cutter example
Right.
for this. There's no cookie cutter. What's going to work?
Mhm.
What's going to work with Gina up north?
Yeah.
That's working, and it's fantastic. It might not work here in an urban setting, in a very small First Nation urban setting.
Yeah.
Might not work. So being diverse with our programs and our work that we're doing with Indigenous community, being able to have the diversity. But that's what I'm saying. Go out and talk to the nations. Go out and
Yeah.
talk to the people that are in that area. The second thing is, I always got to say it. We've come a long ways. We've still got a long ways to go, and that's okay.
Mhm.
That's okay. We've made huge strides in the past few years, and we still got a long ways to go, and that's okay. We'll figure that out together. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
And fantastic, Gina. Fantastic.
Thank you, Chief Harley. And I just wanted to acknowledge and say you're right. When I go into every First Nation community in Yukon here, it says we don't bring the cookie cutter approach. Is what works in your community may not work in the next community. So please, that's usually what I say out of some of my presentations. You're absolutely right. What I'm doing here in the north, here in the Yukon, may not work for in BC or in Ontario. What I love is that how we can share our information to each other. So thank you.
Gina, and of course the chief and Taylor, let me just say that we've had a lot of these webinars, and I always encourage people to speak from the heart. I think we started out today with 36, and usually after an hour they start dropping off. An hour and a half, most or if not half are gone. And we haven't lost. We're down to 27 now, but people have stayed because of your contribution. And Taylor, including, I don't want anybody to forget about Taylor. Also, Jason. Jason, your interest in our work and your skill moderating this has been very important to me, and I appreciate it. I just want to say a couple of other things, and I'm going to take the time to do it, and I hope you'll hang in there. The reason that our coalition exists is specifically what we're talking about. There is no central sort of entity in Canada that brings together gold standard, best practices, all of the latest information on the training and education of our police officers. It doesn't exist. That's why we've moved from the Coalition for Canadian Police Reform to the National Centre of Policing Excellence. The National Centre of Policing Excellence in Canada has so much potential, Gina and Harley and Taylor and all others, to bring all this together. Somebody said earlier, and I think it was Janine, I think it was, that well, how can we spread this, or how can we get together and coordinate so we can move this around? There is no entity in Canada to do that. It's so sparse from province to province, local jurisdiction. The RCMP have a different mindset and mentality, but a National Centre of Policing Excellence developing a current and relevant education program, it just an Indigenous history and culture and the impact of it and all of that for police officers to learn would be a giant step forward. That's why we need all your support as we move forward. Armand Labarge talked about the Guardian versus Warriors. The RCMP were formed and deployed in Canada for a different purpose than all the municipal police organizations in Canada. They had a different purpose, as the Indigenous community know, which is to control them and all of the things that are that they've gone through and through colonialism. The Trust and Transformation report that we put out, we commissioned, I should say, clearly shows that all of the commissioned reports, the Trust and Transformation Reconciliation reports, the murdered and missing Indigenous women, and all of the other 14 or 15 reports that have recommendations around training of police officers and education of police officers, shows that not only is it not being accomplished, it's very, very superficial. That's why a National Centre of Policing Excellence is important. The RCMP were formed for a different reason. The municipal police organizations were formed under a British rule, but with Peel's principles. And I ask you all to read Peel's principles, because the term law enforcement is not in Peel's principles. It's about prevention. It's about duty of care. It's about looking after people. That's what Peel's principles are about. And it's a different model than the RCMP. So I just say to you that read the report that I think John Lilly has just put up here. think about what our coalition is trying to do. That's why I welcome your attendance today, and I thank you so much for everything that you've said. But a National Center of Policing Excellence, with your support, created by the federal government to improve all of the education for police officers, has so much potential. I don't know what else to say, I guess, other than say thank you to all of you sincerely. You spoke from the heart. Everything that you said was so important. I'm very pleased to have you here. I'm hoping that our public education webinars can be successful, because that is what they're for, is to inform the public and many others and all these different agencies of why we need to move forward and elevate the police profession in Canada through the National Center. Well, that's all I have to say. Gina, Harley, Taylor, and Jason, my sincere appreciation to you, and we must continue to work on this. We must keep in touch. We must work with one another to continue to communicate. And if our coalition can do more, please just get in contact with us. Phone, email, text, doesn't matter. We just need to continue with our work. So my sincere appreciation to all of you, and my sincere appreciation particularly to all of the attendees today. Thank you very much.